our guest today is unrelentless in its efforts to fight for the rights of the marginalized here in Malaysia. It is #SUARA's distinct pleasure and honor to be able to speak to Parti Sosialis Malaysia's Dr. Michael Jeyakumar Devaraj. Welcome to #SUARA. Dr. Kumar, I'm going to jump right in. What are your thoughts on the recently concluded 14th general election? And how does Parti Sosialis Malaysia feel about the change in government?
I think it's a great change. I think for the first time in 60 years, we have a change of government. And there's a chance to do the reform that this country so desperately needs. And I think what the government has done the last 3 weeks is quite promising. So I think it's a good time to set a lot of things right again.
Okay. Speaking of setting things right, you mentioned to me earlier when we were having a conversation backstage that what happened in Sungai Siput between Parti Sosialis Malaysia and PKR is now water under the bridge. But if you had a chance to go back in time, would Parti Sosialis Malaysia perhaps have pushed harder or tried a different tact in joining Pakatan Harapan?
I think the problem wasn't that we didn't want to join them. Actually, we asked to join Pakatan Rakyat at that time in 2012. But we were told to wait. And when Pakatan Harapan was formed later in 2015 or so, we weren't invited. So it wasn't really our choice not to join. We were not really invited, not really. And when we asked to join, we were not taken in. So that is the situation.
I did read in a couple of news reports that there was something to do with the use of logos as well.
Well, yes. Towards the end, I was offered to the Sungai Siput seat on a PKR logo, with the condition that I get several of the other PSM candidates to not contest in their seats. So we had problems like that.
All right. Well, for the benefit of our viewers who may not be aware, perhaps you could just share with us what are the ideals of Parti Sosialis Malaysia.
Okay, Parti Sosialis Malaysia believes in trying to work for a more fair society, where you have a better distribution of wealth, and you have better social security for people, like into old age pension, better minimum wage, things like that. And we're also concerned about the environment. I think the way in which our country is developing, I think we are degrading the environment too much. And the third thing that we're interested in actually is more people participation in government, more democracy in the workplace, in local communities, local government.
But how is this different from what the current government wants, the current coalition in government?
I think a lot of things are common.
Okay.
A lot of things are common. But there are some differences. I mean, like for one, we believe that you cannot make basic services a business.
Okay. Privatization?
Yes. Okay. Even of transport, housing provision, healthcare. When you make these things business and you have for-profit agencies running there, then generally it skews the demand. And then cosmetic care for the wealthy takes precedence over basic care for the poor.
I've read that you're also quite vocal against medical tourism, health tourism.
Yes.
Why is this?
Okay, the reason being, when you have more medical tourism, you have more private hospitals.
Yes.
And you have more private hospitals, they actually steal specialists, and they steal good nurses and lab technicians from the government hospitals. The government hospitals now have a lack of specialists. We only have about 25% of all the specialists in the country are in government service. 75% are outside. But more than 70% of patients go to government hospitals for treatment. So if you expand health tourism and expand the private sector, then you would exacerbate the outflow of specialists from government to private.
Okay.
So it's for those kind of reasons that actually we are against health tourism at this point in time.
Right.
At some point in time, when you have enough specialists in government service,
yes,
perhaps it's all right, but not right now.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about the subject of equality, which is something that is the very foundation of what Parti Sosialis Malaysia believes in. How is equality really possible in a secular country such as ours?
Well, I think we're not talking of complete equality, but I think the level of inequality now, okay, let's say our minimum wage now is what, $1,000 a month? But some of the CEOs of our banks make $200,000 a month. That's the kind of thing we've got to look at. Because when you have that degree of inequality, it leads to stunting of the families, of the children in the lower income groups. And it also leads to a limitation of aggregate demand, and that affects the whole growth of the economy. It affects investment opportunities. So it's severe inequality that we're seeing now in Malaysia and in the world is not good even for capitalism.
No.
No, it's not.
But it's such a huge gap. How do you even begin leveling the playing field?
Well, I think things like the minimum wage, for example, is something you can start with. But these are some of these things you cannot do in isolation in Malaysia alone. You'll have to work together with other ASEAN countries to talk about how they can increase their minimum wage. You see, for example, if Malaysia increases minimum wage by itself unilaterally too high, we would tend to lose investment to Thailand and maybe to Vietnam. But if ASEAN as a whole decided to do something about minimum wage, and together we increase from wherever we are, whichever base we are, we all increase, then Malaysia won't be in such a disadvantaged position if we would increase ours, is it?
Right.
So these kind of things have to be discussed, as we talked about, because now we live in a global economy. And so some things we need to do to improve equality has got to be done almost globally, but at least regionally first.
I suppose everybody grows together.
Yes.
You mentioned the minimum wage, and of course, Sime Darby Plantation has been in the news recently for saying that they're planning on pushing back against the government's plan to raise the minimum wage. What are Parti Sosialis Malaysia's views on the statement made by Sime Darby Plantations?
You see, Sime Darby has got a point because they are competing with Indonesia, for example,
Yes.
for producing of oil palm. And if our minimum wage goes up too high, then our oil palm production costs will be affected, and Indonesia's product may be more competitive.
Sure.
So they have a valid point that we have to consider. So what I said earlier about ASEAN countries as a whole can do. So that's something of our longer term foreign policy goals would be to have a common policy where we all try to push up things, push up minimum wage, push up corporate tax, instead of this mad rush to the bottom. Now there's a competition to the bottom to get investment, to get FDI.
Yes.
And we've got to recognize that and do something about that. But the other thing about what we can do in the country is the government has mentioned that it will do things to help the sectors deal with a rise in the minimum wage.
Okay.
So things like the taxes on palm oil companies,
All right.
perhaps that can be eased off a bit, and so you get more money in the pockets of workers. We can do things like that.
What are some of the other sectors that are kind of impacted by the minimum wage?
I think the sectors that won't be impacted are the utilities,
Yes.
Government services, but even factories, for example, factories producing say shoes in Malaysia will have to be worried about the cost of shoes from Vietnam and from Thailand. And so if you raise minimum wage too fast and too high here, that could be a problem. So I think we have to, I'm a socialist, but we have to be realists. And we have to say that yes, they do have a point. So what do we do about that particular problem? And one thing we can consider doing is that we can have this concept of a social wage.
Okay.
In the sense that you don't give it as a wage to a person, but let's say you have subsidized transport, public transport.
Okay.
So that means the Malaysian families don't have to spend so much on transport. So that's also
okay.
So you call it subsidized healthcare. We do have subsidized healthcare, but right now a lot of Malaysian families are forced to take private insurance because they can't rely on government healthcare. So they have insurance in case it doesn't work here, they can go outside. And private insurance can cost anything like $300 to $400 a month per family. Okay. So if we can improve healthcare, the people can have a confidence in our Malaysian healthcare system, we can save $400 from the budget of a middle class family.
True.
So that's the way again of what I mean by social wage. So I think we can look at how we can improve our basic services so people don't have to go to the private sector. And so you can actually improve disposable income actually without increasing wages too much.
Right. Yeah. You said earlier that you are a socialist. As a socialist, do you feel that socialism is misunderstood in Malaysia?
I think quite badly misunderstood. And I think it's the relic of what happened during the independence era, where the British didn't want to have a leftist government. and they demonize the left, and usually history is written by the winners.
Yes.
And since the right wing won, they've demonized socialism since then. So I think that's been the baggage we carry.
What do you feel are some of the biggest misconceptions about socialism here in Malaysia, and how would you go about setting that wrong right?
Well, I think one thing when people think about socialism is they think about communism, they think of violence.
Okay.
But I think that has been, in a way, partially set right by the fact that the Socialist Party has been around for the last 20 years. And I bet you can't count the number of buildings we bombed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so a lot of even communist parties in Europe, Communist Party of Italy, or Communist Party of Kerala,
Yes.
they're all electoral parties.
Yes.
So you can, communist parties and socialist parties can use the electoral route to try and bring about the changes they want to bring. So not every communist party, not every socialist party is a proponent of violent change. So that's one of the things we got to correct. And the other thing is the position of socialism on religion.
Do explain.
Well, I mean, some people believe that, if you're a socialist or you're a communist, you are an atheist,
Right.
or you're anti-religion.
Yes.
But actually, there are quite a number of socialists who are from religions, because, ultimately the message of religion is about solidarity, it's about love, it's about concern for others.
Which is the message of socialism.
Unlike capitalism, which is greed,
Yes.
avarice, of getting ahead,
Yes.
individualism. So I think there's much more in common with socialism and religion in terms of principles and values than capitalism and religion.
So what sort of positive changes do you feel that socialism, a socialist manifesto, could bring to Malaysia today?
I think it will make Malaysia more harmonious. Make Malaysia more fair. And it will make Malaysians live with more solidarity and more in harmony with nature.
Okay.
So these are things that socialists would work towards.
So besides healthcare, I understand the environment is also an area that you are interested in.
Yes. Yeah.
And what aspect of it would you like to see sort of changed here in Malaysia?
I think we got to reduce our carbon footprint.
Right.
I think, for a developing nation, I think we are one of the, per capita carbon dioxide emission is quite high, much higher than Indonesia or Thailand. We are close to UK's levels. I think what we should try and do is try and shift our electricity production to renewable sources.
Right.
And maybe within the next 15 years, by 2035, we should try and come completely off coal.
But not nuclear, because that's not something PSM believes in.
No, not nuclear. I think we should go on tidal, on solar,
right.
On geothermal if we can, wind.
Okay.
It is possible. The technology is there, but we've got to spend some money on that.
Okay. Well, given that Parti Sosialis Malaysia is no longer represented in our parliament, what are plans? What are you going to do for the next 5 years moving forward?
Well, there are a lot of things to do. I think, we will try and engage with the current government, because many of them are friends. And we have policy positions on, say, like transport, energy, healthcare, international trade, migrant workers, which we're going to go and talk to the various ministries and put across our views, a kind of a constructive engagement. And we're going to continue the research we're doing. We're doing some research into persistent rural poverty. We're going to continue those things. So not being in parliament doesn't stop all that. You can do a number of things despite not being in parliament.
Well, we wish you all the best, and Parti Sosialis Malaysia all the best as well. Come back to our show, please, Dr. Kumar. We'd love to be able to talk to you a little bit more.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
My name is Sumitra Salvaraj. This is #SUARA.